everyone. A little tall here. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful evening. My name is Matthew Packwood, and I'm director of the Oregon Origins Project. As a reminder, please silence your cell phones for the duration of the show. We begin by offering a land acknowledgement and a call to action. The Portland metro area is the traditional homeland and fishing and gathering range of tribes throughout the region. We honor the peoples who have cared for the land since time immemorial. Tribes of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation, Cowlitz Indian Tribe, and many others. We also offer a land acknowledgement for the Cove Palisades area of Central Oregon, which are the inspiration for tonight's event. The Cove Palisades are the traditional homelands of the Numu people, also known as the Northern Paiute, who have hunted, gathered, and fished there since time immemorial. The area was also frequented by the native peoples of the Columbia River and Northern California, who used the north-south trail along the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. The lands continue to be important to these peoples, and we recognize their deep connections to them. Oregon Origins Project seeks to lift up and support Indigenous peoples in Oregon, providing a platform for their artists and culture bearers to share their traditions and artistic work. We ask you to join us in honoring them. In lieu of fees for tonight's event, please consider a donation to the Indigenous organizations listed at our website, OregonOrigins.org. Our thanks to tonight's event sponsors, Ronnie LaCroute, the Regional Arts and Culture Council, Reed College Master of Arts in Liberal Studies program, Central Oregon Geoscience Society, and our fiscal sponsor, Fuse Theater Ensemble. Tonight's event features the premiere of the new play, Convergence, a 15-minute intermission, then a presentation on the Cove Palisades, and a Q&A with the creative team. And now, Convergence.
On a bit of a journey.
And before that, what journey were you on? A day at work where nothing went right? Ferrying kids to every corner of the metropolitan area? An unplanned trip to the vet because your cat, Pickles, had something oozing out of his eye.
And before that, what journey were you on? Nervously applying for that job? The first time, buckling your baby into her car seat, the day you brought her home. That argument with your ex about who'd keep Pickles after the breakup.
And before that, what journey were you on? College, grade school, learning how to walk.
And before that, a cell dividing, coming into this world, being part of those here long before you.
And the creatures before your kind. And the ones before them, and the ever-evolving land that holds it all.
There's always a time before, and a story to go with it.
It's sort of like this. See those layers? Each is a story beginning over and over again.
Lava and landslides.
Earthquakes and floods.
Building up, eroding down.
There are so many stories, and every one of them begins somewhere.
This.
This, kinda, sorta.
Not kinda, sorta. This begins.
This begins.
This begins.
This begins when something shifts.
So,
I mean, yeah. Wow, sure.
you can think about it. You can totally take some time to think about it.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
All the time you need.
Of course. Thank you. Wow. This is the playwright. I am the playwright.
This is the playwright, and she's just been asked if she'd be interested in writing a play.
And of course I'd be interested in writing a play because I'm a playwright. And that's what playwrights do.
This is the playwright, and she's just been asked if she'd be interested in writing a play about the geologic history of a location in Oregon.
Any location. Maybe somewhere that means something to you. Some place you find interesting, inspiring.
Oh.
What comes to mind?
The playwright suddenly can't remember a single location in the state she was born and raised in.
Hard to choose.
Do you know much about geology?
The playwright knows nothing about geology.
Well,
The playwright failed her science in high school.
I've always found geology deeply, deeply fascinating.
The playwright is a liar.
cool.
Cool.
So,
Count me in.
The playwright doesn't know what she got herself into.
Crack.
But she decides to try.
I do.
she does.
You sure?
We're sure.
Okay.
Okay.
And that is where this story begins. There are so many stories.
And every one of them begins somewhere.
This?
This.
This, kinda, sorta.
Not kinda, sorta. This begins.
This begins.
This begins.
This begins when something shifts.
Interesting shoes.
Huh?
Not you, her.
Thanks.
Where'd you get them?
I don't know. I've had them a while.
Oh, so they're old. Oh, vintage?
Maybe.
Or just old. Dude, not a bad thing.
No, it's fine.
Old's not bad. Old's just old.
Okay.
They're cute.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. So. Okay.
You know those moments in life where something you know to be deeply true about yourself is challenged, and all of a sudden, bam! Everything is thrown out of whack? I'm 13 years old, and I'm standing there looking at these girls and thinking, I did not consider myself to be a person capable of murder, but maybe I was wrong. I could kill. Ms. Halvard. Because Ms. Halvard put me in this group. Because Ms. Halvard isn't as good as the science teacher at my other school. Because Ms. Halvard was, in this moment, single-handedly crushing my dream of going to Junior EnviroVision-thon Making Waves Competition Nationals, which I wanted to to win ever since my cousin Jaden went 6 years ago and got to stay at a hotel. On the coast. And even go on a zip line. I'm smarter than Jaden. I care more than Jaden. I deserve this so much more than Jaden. But looking at these girls who are the best at Miss Halvard's joke of a science class, in this joke of a school, in this joke of a town my parents dragged me to has to offer, I can tell they're going to weigh me down, and that I'm not going to nationals, and it's all Miss Halvard's fault. Ugh. So, this is our group.
Yep. Sure is.
Awesome.
So, are we gonna do anything? Cool. Cool. Well, this is fun.
What do you want me to say?
Okay. Hey, Crux.
Huh?
Let's talk about science.
Okay.
What you got there?
Rapper chain?
Cool.
I guess.
How long did that take?
Well, I've been saving rappers for like a month and a half.
Super cool.
Thanks.
What do you think, new girl?
About what?
What she's making?
Neato.
It is.
Uh-huh.
I think it's cool.
I didn't say it wasn't. It's a very creative use of trash.
It is.
I said it is.
I mean, kind of the point.
Huh?
Envirovision-thon, repurposing refuse, recycling. Kind of in line with the whole idea or whatever.
You're right. She's right.
Environmentally conscious.
Sure.
It is.
You really think that's not going to end up in the garbage eventually?
Wow.
Just saying.
I'm gonna keep it. It took me a long time.
Okay,
I will.
cool. What is your problem? What do you mean? You're like such a jerk. I'm sorry you feel that way.
It's not a feeling. It's a scientific observation.
Can you guys stop? I mean, Miss Halvard said this would be fun. I'm not having fun.
My old school sends teams to nationals like every year. You know how many times your school has been to nationals? None. I asked, not once.
Okay.
I wanted to win.
What's the big deal about winning?
What do you mean?
Well, like you win, and then what?
You get to go to nationals.
And then what?
You get to be a person who went to nationals. Put it on your college resume and stuff.
We're in 8th grade.
So,
That's a long way away.
I think ahead. Because I'm getting out of here. Because my life is going to be so much bigger than this place. Because my life is supposed to be so much bigger than this place.
Mine too. What? My life could be big.
Thing is, the only reason we've never gone to nationals is because we've never entered before. So let's go.
It's not that easy.
It didn't say it would be. I'm still going to nationals.
Me too. I'm going to nationals too.
Yes. exceptionals.
Yes!
And that is where another story begins.
In a space before where we are now.
There are a lot of stories.
Every one of them begins somewhere.
This.
This.
This. Kinda, sorta.
Not kinda sorta. This begins.
This begins.
This begins.
This begins when something shifts.
Okay. So, this is the part where I get to tell y'all a little bit about me. Here I am. That's me. Duh. You know, it was actually really hard to choose a picture. At first, I was thinking of using this one or this one. But
Oh my God! You're photogenic. We get it.
it's not about that. It's about trying to communicate the essence of who I am. It's not easy to do. Okay.
Well, you actually really do look so good in that picture, though.
Oh, thank you. But I ended up going with this one. Because it just, you know what I'm saying? I think it was a good choice.
It's very you.
Exactly. So, some facts about me. Let me say off the bat that my water quality is exceptional, like all the way through. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, you do. Basically, I am one of the largest spring-fed rivers in the United States, NBD. I'm clear, I'm pure.
You're cold.
That's not a bad thing.
Didn't say it was.
48 degrees year-round. Consistency is something to be proud of. Cool.
Guys, stop.
Okay. Anyway, I start here. Practically fully formed. Not to brag or anything. And I end here. With these two. I end up here. I can't stop thinking about the end. Not the then, not the now, but the what's to come. I'm sort of constantly stuck there. In this place I've never been, this place I've yet to go. I'm stuck. I try very hard to make sure that nothing will get in my way, but I always have this feeling that even if I do everything right, inevitably something will. I don't know what it is, just a feeling that something's coming. Something impossible to work around. Something that will stop me, and I don't want to be stopped. I really don't want to be stopped.
Here's the thing. You have to go through the middle.
You can't get to the end without it.
And you have to be relentless.
You have to keep pushing forward.
If you have even a vague idea about what you think you should do, you have to follow.
You have to trust.
And if something's in your way, an impossible something blocking your path, you have no choice but to dig away at it.
Bit by bit.
Even though other things seem easier.
Even though everything seems easier.
You keep moving forward.
Cutting away.
Because the only way out is through.
The only way you know where you're really going is to get there.
And you feel it.
You feel it so strongly.
That thing that tells you to just
Keep
going. This is the playwright.
I am the playwright.
This is the playwright, and she's trying to think of a place. Any place.
a place that means something to her.
A place that's interesting, inspiring, and at first there's
Nothing.
Even though she knows that can't be true.
Nothing. Nothing. Nothing.
And as she tries to land on something, the chant of nothing, swirls, ripples, crashes through her mind. Not unlike nothing.
A river.
a river.
A river!
Wait. 3 rivers.
A place where 3 rivers meet. Some place lodged deep in her memory. Something she read about? A picture she glanced at? Or was it a visit long, long ago? A place where rivers converge and basalt canyon walls stretch up to the sky. What was it called? Suddenly, a whisper.
Huh?
A murmur.
Huh?
One might say a trickle of recollection. That's it.
The cove?
You've got this.
The cove,
Come on.
I don't know.
You do.
I don't.
You do.
I don't.
You do.
Palisades.
Bingo.
The Cove Palisades.
There it is.
The Cove Palisades.
That's right.
The Cove Palisades.
The Cove
The
Palisades.
Cove Palisades.
Now, right.
Here, look at the camera. The camera's right there.
Oh, right there.
Here. Okay. Let's see. Okay. This is it. Smile. Wait. Say EnviroVision EnviroVision Great.
Oh, well, that's done.
Hold on.
Look at this place. Weird to be back?
Really weird. It smells the same. Doesn't it smell the same, Em?
Just a sec. Almost done.
I hadn't noticed.
Well, that's because you're here all the time. You're used to it.
Done. Sorry, what did you ask?
If it smells the same.
It does. Huh.
See?
It really hasn't changed at all.
It's changed. I made changes.
25 years.
I know.
I'm so glad you reached out to let us know.
Yeah.
Oh, of course. I'm surprised you made it.
Wouldn't miss it. You think I'd miss it?
Oh, well,
I've got to see it one last time.
I can't believe they're tearing this old place down.
I can.
The ceiling tiles are crumbling. It is structurally unsound, and the damage from that pipe that burst in the gym still hasn't been fixed.
Really?
Yeah, still a bunch of duct tape.
Crazy. This place is like a time capsule.
Speaking of time capsules, you look great. You both do.
Thanks.
Really great.
I wouldn't go that far.
It's a new shirt, so.
I love it.
Yeah?
Well, you look...
Stop. Hold on. I'm gonna do a thing. Okay. Hey y'all! I'm here with my two childhood besties. Say hi, you two. Hi. And this is the science classroom where it all began. Our teacher, the wonderful Ms. Howard, paired us up for a competition. And while we didn't make it to nationals that year, we have stuck together through it all. The ups, the downs, the twists, the turns. Oh, these two have been my rocks. Right, guys? You're my rocks. Woo! Speaking of rocks, it's no secret that I'm big on self-care. And what better way to care for yourself than to heal your energy with this gorgeous set of healing crystals from Cosmic Divine. In fact, I love them so much that I'm gifting some to my dear friends.
Oh, thanks.
And if you have a bestie, I urge you to do the same. Click the link below, and for a limited time, use the promo code BESTIE3 for 40% off. Bye, y'all.
What are we supposed to do with these?
I think you put it on your head or something. I don't know. What were we talking about?
How often do you do that?
What?
Hey, y'all!
You don't watch my feed?
I do.
Sorry.
If you don't keep people engaged, your numbers fall.
She's like a full-on influencer.
Well, do you like it?
What's not to like?
It seems like a lot.
Do you know how many followers I have?
She has so many.
That's great.
It is.
Good. As long as you're happy,
I am.
then I'm happy for you.
What about you? Are you happy?
I'm happy.
Are you?
Yes.
Here.
Yes.
Still here. Being Ms. Halvard 2.0.
It's very rewarding.
Oh, okay, I believe you.
Stop it. You know it wasn't her choice.
We always have choices. You can't let one bad thing change the course of your
Can
life.
we not talk about this?
I say this with love. You still have so much potential, so much to offer.
I am happy.
Okay.
There is good I can do here.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
You know those moments when something you know to be deeply true about yourself is challenged and then, bam, everything's thrown out of whack? I'm 40 now. 40 years old. And I can feel the price tag hidden in the sleeve of the shirt I'm wearing rubbing against my skin. And I wonder, why? Why did I drive all the way out to a fancy store to buy a shirt I thought seemed like something they would like? Because what I'm realizing in this moment is that my battle wounds and scars are more impressive than a fancy shirt. All the obstacles I've circumvented, all the trials I've endured, the fact that I'm still here, still going, it's more impressive than a shirt. but they don't ask. And I love them. I do. But I'm beginning to think that I don't care. I don't think this works.
Can you pull it up again? Ah, thanks.
Perfect.
So what's it like?
Huh?
This bigger life?
I don't know.
You made it.
Not yet. But I'm on my way.
What does that feel like?
It feels amazing.
That's really great.
Actually, I'm tired all the time.
Me too.
Yeah. But we keep going, right?
Yeah, we do. Smile.
Hi. This is the part where I share some facts about myself. Can I, Nice. There we go. Okay. So, I don't like this picture of myself. I mean, it's not self-consciousness or faux modesty or whatever. I just think I look sort of thin, you know? Like, thinner than I'd like to be. When this was taken, it was pretty dry. And for them, that's not a problem. They've got reserves. Like, seriously, you cannot imagine what's going on beneath the surface with those two. It's crazy.
Stop.
Comparison is the thief of joy.
And that's a really good picture of you. You're stunning. You really are.
I agree. Absolutely stunning.
Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to explain how I'm different and things affect me differently.
What things?
I don't know. Things. I mean, basically, the deal is I start here and I end up here. And no matter what nonsense is going on over here in the middle, I have managed to keep it up. Keep it going, stay pretty healthy for a long time. Years, millennia. So why is it all of a sudden I feel so...
Try focusing on the beginning.
Right. Right. It just sort of feels like things are supposed to be a certain way, the way they've always been, and for whatever reason, they're just not.
The beginning, kiddo.
Oh. Okay. I start here. I see snakes. Thousands of snakes slithering up sun-baked canyon walls. And they're so scared. There's this thing that happens when I'm going about my life the way I always do, the way I always have, expecting the sort of unexpected things I've learned to expect.
to deal with. But it hits me. I'm hit with the knowledge that can't be the knowledge of something that can't be true. And everything all around me feels like a place I'm not supposed to be. And I see snakes. As if they're there. Racing in a panic, up and up. Away from me. Away from my unintended touch. Because I'm not supposed to be there. And this hasn't happened yet. But I know it will. Somehow, I just know. And I don't understand.
The lower course is the end, where things begin to slow down,
Flatten out.
Get wider.
warmer,
Sometimes a little muddy.
and we don't really like to talk about endings.
But do things really end?
Or do we just become a part of something bigger?
Eventually, we all get where we're going. Right? This is the playwright.
I am the playwright.
This is the playwright. She just had a realization.
Geology is kind of cool.
Uh-huh.
Like, really cool. I never knew. Here's the thing about writing a play. You have to be relentless. You have to keep pushing forward. If you have a vague idea about where you think you should go, you have to follow. You have to trust. And if something's in your way, an impossible something blocking your path, you have no choice but to dig away at it, bit by bit. Even though some things seem easier. Even though everything else in the world seems easier. You keep moving forward. Hunting through. Because the only way out is through. The only way you know where you're really going is to get there.
There's cake. It's really good cake. To say the English teacher made it, and I don't know what she's doing in the public school system, because she obviously should be running like a world-class bakery.
Oh, well, yes, please.
A small piece. Like medium, small.
Look at this place.
I know, right?
Look at all the love there is for you.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean, seriously, you are aware of that, right? Throwing parties, baking cakes.
They're sweet and probably thrilled I'll be out of their hair.
Ha.
They love you.
Well,
They do.
And we love you.
We do.
Connie? You know those moments in life where something you know to be deeply true about yourself is challenged, and all of a sudden, bam, everything is thrown out of whack. I never thought I would be standing here, feeling like this, feeling like I did something, feeling like I made a difference. I thought I was playing it safe and refused to take a risk. Stayed. But I'm doing great and moving forward, and strangely, I feel stronger than ever. And I love you. Oh, I love you both so much.
So, what are you gonna do with all your free time?
Sleep.
Wrong answer. Retirement is a big deal. You need to mark it with something special.
This is about all the special I can handle.
I mean like a vacation.
I'll think about it.
I'm serious. Travel. There's nothing stopping you.
She's right. You can go anywhere.
It feels really strange to be leaving this place behind. Whoa.
Do you guys realize it's been 50 years?
Nuh-uh.
No, she's right. It has.
Oh, God. No, but that's impressive, though, right? Half a century.
Oh. You know what I realized when I was packing to come here? Guess.
No idea.
It's a good one.
Okay.
I realized that I am jealous of you. I've been jealous of you. I think I've been jealous of you for 50 years.
Duh.
No way. Why?
Because you always knew where you were going.
I did.
Yes! It took me forever to figure things out. But you managed to be naturally content.
I don't know about that.
It's true. At ease with your life. And look at you now. Look what you've made.
It's not much.
Are you kidding? It's huge.
Well, you didn't do too bad either.
I'm not complaining. I think we're all pretty impressive.
Well,
Yes, you too.
I didn't do anything.
Are you kidding me?
All I did was put one foot in front of the other and made it work.
And look where you got. What you built.
You're an artist.
I guess. Speaking of which, I brought you a present. A retirement gift.
You actually kept it.
I said I would.
I know where I want to go to celebrate.
Yeah?
Yes. And you're coming with me. Both of you.
Where?
Well, I know this great hotel on the coast. And I hear there's even a zip line. No, I'm not kidding. We never got the chance before, so let's go now. Let's go to Nationals. What do you say? There it is.
Go to Nationals.
Let's
Yes!
go to National.
that was always the plan. Right? Well, I guess it's my turn. All right. That's me. So, I may as well say this off the bat. Address the elephant that's in the room. I'm the one who goes on. Sorry. I know that that's, sorry.
No, it's okay.
I didn't, choose this. I never thought it would be me.
It's really fine.
It doesn't feel fine.
Just tell them about yourself.
Okay, well, that's me. I start here at Little Lava Lake. And over here, and over here, I join the Columbia, and we make our way all the way to the sea. And there are so many stories I could tell you. Like this one time, it was wild. My whole course was altered when this channel filled with lava. Yeah. A lot of stories. But my favorite part, my very favorite, is right here.
Yeah, mine too.
Do you hear that?
Look at the picture.
No, but something is wrong.
It'll be okay.
Look at
It's
us.
just another part of the story.
Look how happy we are.
Is it getting louder?
You'll still move forward. Try to focus on that.
In a space before where we are now, we still move forward.
And a playwright carves out a play.
And some old friends carve out a life.
And 3 rivers carve out a beautiful, beautiful canyon. There are so many stories, and every one of them ends somewhere.
This.
This.
Well, say it.
But
This ends.
This ends.
This ends.
does it?
Hello. I think I'm supposed to get started. There we go. I'm Danielle. I teach earth science courses for the University of Oregon, but I am totally remote from Eugene campus and live in Bend. And I'm going to be presenting a little bit about the geologic background of the Three Rivers. And I'm also here representing the Central Oregon Geoscience Society. That's a nonprofit group that was really happy to help support this production. And if you are interested in any aspect of geology in Oregon, you can check out that group for more information. All right, so I just have a few slides to go through. It looks like maybe the clicker isn't. Oh, there it goes. All right, so before we get going, I just want to introduce a couple of maps of the state of Oregon that we'll be spending quite a bit of time looking at. So the first one is the state, and this is a topography map. So areas of lower topography are shown in green, Willamette Valley. It's a little hard to make out some of the colors on the map. And areas of higher topography, like the Cascade Mountains, are shown in tan, and then kind of darker colors of tan and maybe orange-brown. So topographic map, we'll be taking a lot of looks at that. And then the other map that we'll take a lot of, come on, there we go, okay, a little delay. This is also a map of the state, and this shows all waterways in the state of Oregon. I love this map, it's really cool. Not all of these waterways have water in them all the time. Some of them only have water, rarely, but it still gives you a sense of all of the rivers and streams throughout the state. All right, so that's just a brief introduction of these two maps we'll look at, and now I'll go back to the state of Oregon. Here we are in Portland, here's Bend and Redmond and Sisters, and we're gonna zoom into this area on the map where these three rivers converge. And the rivers are shown in blue on this map, and it's a little hard to see them. So I'm just gonna highlight, there we go, the Deschutes. And I've ended it at this location where the three rivers come together. And here is the, never know when the next, there we go. It's a 2-click clicker. Here's the Crooked River coming in from the east and meeting up with the Deschutes. And then, wait for it. Maybe I need to be, I need to point to you guys. There's the Metolius. And then, of course, after the convergence, the three make their way together to the Columbia. All right. So, as we're looking at the topography of this map, you can now get a kind of a sense that they all start in mountainous regions. Crooked and the Deschutes and the Metolius, they're all starting in high topography. So I'm going to now back up, zoom way out, and get a global perspective of what explains that topography. And plate tectonics explains global topography across the world and in Oregon and locally. So I just wanted to put up a quick map where we're looking at the plates on the surface of the Earth. So if you think of what you know about the planet, it has the core, the mantle, the crust. The crust is brittle and broken up into these plates. And these plates are in constant motion, interacting with each other. So this map is showing those plates. The yellow is outlining the boundaries of plates. So this is the Pacific plate. And this is the North American plate. And notice the North American plate includes North America, but also half of the Atlantic Ocean as well. So the plates are not quite the same as the continents. And they're moving. Those red arrows indicate not only the direction of movement of every plate on the planet, but also the rate of movement. So if you see an arrow that's this long, that represents 10 centimeters per year. And in geology, oftentimes we're dealing with these ages and numbers, millions or billions, like things we just, as humans, have a hard time wrapping our minds around. But 10 centimeters a year, like we can all kind of relate to that. So these are moving on a human time scale. And now I'm going to zoom into this tiny little plate here that is actually moving, but it isn't moving very quickly. I think if there was an arrow smacked on top of that plate, that's the Juan de Fuca plate, the arrow would cover the plate. But that plate, I'll zoom in on the next slide, and we'll look at that plate. There it is, that small Juan de Fuca plate. Everything to the left of this line is the Pacific plate, and everything to the right of this line is the Juan de Fuca plate. And then this is the boundary between the Juan de Fuca plate and the North American plate. And the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting or sliding beneath the North American plate. That's what those little black triangles indicate, is that this plate is actually moving towards the east, the North American plate is moving towards the west. They're on a collision course, slow motion geologic collision, and the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting beneath the North American plate. And that creates a linear range of volcanoes parallel to the subduction zone. So in the last image, we were looking at a map view, like looking down at the Juan de Fuca plate and the North American plate. Now we're looking at a cross section. So this is as if someone just took a huge knife and cut east-west, right through Portland, right through Mount Hood, and kind of moved everything away so that we can see what's going on beneath us. So right here, where we stand, or sit for you, there is a subducting plate. That Juan de Fuca plate is subducting beneath us. And the process of why magma is produced in this area is sort of the focus of a whole other talk. We can't get into that in this talk. But the end result is that magma is produced in subduction zones, and that magma rises up and it feeds volcanoes. And of course, it's not just Mount Hood. This is a two-dimensional image that's representing a three-dimensional process. So that subducting slab of the Juan de Fuca plate is coming out of the screen towards us, and it's going into the screen. And it's not just Mount Hood, it's this whole range of volcanoes. I'll go back one slide, maybe. This whole range of volcanoes parallel. Everywhere where there's subduction occurring offshore of North America, here, that's the subduction zone. Parallel to that, there are volcanoes. All right, so I use this, I kind of zoom out and talk about subduction because subduction shapes almost every aspect of our state. What we know and love about Oregon in terms of landscape is due to subduction. It explains the Coast Range. It explains the Cascade volcanoes. I think, bring up there's a shaded area. That is the Cascade volcanoes. This is the active section of the volcanoes. It includes Mount Hood and Mount Jefferson, the Three Sisters region, and Newberry volcano south of Bend. These clusters of volcanoes in Central Oregon really make the Cascade Range much wider there in Central Oregon than in the rest of the state. But it also includes Crater Lake and down into Mount Shasta in California. So that's all due to subduction. And there's also this Western Cascade Range. This is referred to the High Cascades, the active section of the volcanoes. The Western Cascades is this really rugged topography. If you're going back and forth across the Cascades from the Willamette Valley to Central or Eastern Oregon, you spend some time in that really high topography where you see the snow-covered peaks, but really where you spend most of your time when you're crossing over the Cascades is getting through these really rugged, in the Portland area, this section west of Mount Hood, east of Salem, east of Eugene, east of Portland, really winding up through these mountainous topography, and that's the Western Cascades. And that's ancient subduction. So subduction has been happening for millions of years offshore, and it's what built Oregon, assembled our state for us. Subduction has been occurring since before Oregon even existed, and it created not only what we think of as the Cascades today, but this ancient, old volcanic range called the Western Cascades. And then it also, let me go back one. It also created volcanoes out in this region. So when we look at the kind of where the Crooked River comes from, it comes from these older subduction zone volcanoes. Even before this is the modern version of volcanic activity in Oregon. This is kind of the ancient version of volcanic activity in Oregon, and there's an even more ancient range of subduction zone volcanoes in the Ochiko Mountains. All right, so these will be the birthplaces of these three rivers. And with topography, subduction, pushing up mountain ranges, that also really impacts where precipitation falls. So this is probably an image that's pretty familiar to most of you. Moisture comes in off the Pacific Ocean. Lots of rain falls in the Coast Range as that moisture is driven up over high topography of the Coast Range. That moist air, as it rises up and cools, it precipitates a lot of rain falls on the Coast Range. And then as that air descends into the Willamette Valley, less rain, but still a lot of rain. And then as that air rises over the Cascades, again, it cools and more moisture is driven out of that air. So lots of precipitation occurs on the west slopes of the Cascades. What I don't particularly like about this image is it kind of looks like the east slopes of the Cascades are totally dry. And that, of course, is not true. There's lots of snow on the east slopes of the Cascades as well. There wouldn't be skiing in places like the east side of Mount Hood or Mount Bachelor if there wasn't a lot of snow over here on the east side. But you get the idea. There's a lot of precipitation that's falling in these areas of high topography. And these rivers come from these areas of high topography. So if we think of the moisture, the precipitation, the rain and snow, it falls down onto the landscape, and this is the runoff of that precipitation, all those rivers and streams in Oregon. So now I'm just going to highlight, oops, I'm just shooting the laser at you. This is the Deschutes Basin. So of all those rivers and streams in Oregon, any of that rain and snow that falls on this landscape, if it ends up within the boundaries of this black blob, then it ends up in the Deschutes River, which is right here, or one of its many, many tributaries. So that is another image that we'll see throughout these slides, is kind of looking at that basin and where these three rivers sit within that basin. All right, so now we'll put that basin on topography so we can kind of get an idea where that is in the state. So again, here's Bend and Redmond and Sisters. Portland's up here in the Willamette Valley. This is the High Cascades, that active section of the volcanoes. And we're going to start with the Crooked River and these old volcanic landscapes that the Crooked River starts in. So I have some pictures of, this is just like when I think of the Ochiko Mountains, this is what I think of. Pine trees, gorgeous old growth pine trees, and just flowers. Be there early in the spring to see this, but just lush meadows and flowers. These are old eroded volcanoes. This was a subduction zone millions of years ago. So this is in the Ochikos. This photo was taken in the Ochikos looking out towards the Cascades. So we can see the snow-covered peaks of the Cascades out there. But between the Cascades and where this photo was taken, you just see this old eroded topography of much older volcanoes. No active, lava flows or eruptions, nothing like that has occurred in this area for millions of years. And because these old volcanoes have had millions of years to erode, the volcanic rock that these volcanoes are made up of has weathered to clay and other materials. And clay kind of contributes to the soils. A well-developed soil is a soil that's very thick and has a lot of organic material in it, but also a lot of clay, which means that when water falls on that soil, it's going to kind of soak up into the soil instead of just disappearing down through. Clay is a barrier to water. So the clay kind of helps that soil hold water instead of that water just percolating down and leaving the system. And that means that when rain and snow falls in this area, it runs across the surface. It doesn't percolates down into the ground a little bit, but most of that water runs across the surface and develops rivers and streams. And so the Crooked River has this very well-developed network of streams. Here's the Crooked River, but all those little tributaries, sort of like intricate patterns of these tributaries that feed the Crooked River. And that has a lot to do with that old eroded volcanic material that has weathered to clay, and it holds that water, and so the water runs along the surface. And that means that the Crooked River, there's a photo of the Crooked River. The Crooked River behaves like how you would expect a river to behave. It has high water flows during wet seasons. When all that rain and snow is falling, it's washing across the surface of the land and into the river, and the river goes into flood stage. And in dry times of the year, in summer and fall, when there hasn't been rain for weeks or maybe months, that river goes into a very low stage. So this river has flood stages, it has low stages, it carries a lot of material with it. If there's a flood, then trees and boulders are going to be moved. So this river behaves how we think of rivers behaving and how most rivers in the world do behave. They move a lot of material through their systems, they erode deep canyons. The Crooked River does all of these things, and it has everything to do with that it's in these older volcanic rocks that have weathered to clay and kind of hold that water, keep that water on the surface. All right, so now I think we're going to move on to the Deschutes. So we're going to look at this section here and where the Deschutes comes from, and this is entirely different from where the Crooked River comes from. So these are, the high Cascades are active volcanoes, and when I say active volcanoes, of course they're not erupting right now. We would have heard about it, even in this room. But they have erupted very recently, geologically, and they could erupt again. There are signs of activity throughout this section of the Cascades. So very recent volcanic deposits, porous lava flows, cinder, and pumice. And this picture is of Broken Top in the Three Sisters region. And this red material here is cinder. It's a very kind of light, frothy rock. It looks like pumice. Most people are probably familiar with pumice. We'll have a picture of that in a minute. But so it's full of bubbles, full of holes. It just has a red color, unlike the white of pumice. But you can imagine that when rain or snow, when these snowfields in this picture melt, they're not going to flow, there's not going to be a stream that comes out of the base of that snowfield. It's all just going to percolate down into that porous, very kind of fresh volcanic rock. The next image, I think will show pumice. There we go, there's South Sister. And if you've ever climbed South Sister, this is the trail that you probably took up to the summit. And lots of this white pumice all over the trail. And very poorly developed soils. I have gone out to places like this with soil scientists, and they'll dig a pit and see soil. I don't see soil. I'm a volcanologist. I study volcanoes. I just see a lot of pumice and ash. But there's a little bit of organic material that's been contributed from, some of this plant life. But the soils are very thin to non-existent. And the rocks are so young that they just haven't weathered to clay. There's practically no clay in much of these deposits. And that means that, get another image, this time we're looking at a lava flow, but again, the lava flows are just as porous as the pumice and the cinder. So it means that when rain and snow fall in these areas, it just goes down into the ground. There are very little surface streams. This is Belknap Crater. The Mackenzie, if you've taken Highway 242 or the old Mackenzie Highway, it kind of comes up in this, at the base of this hill. This is Black Crater, and it winds up over in this direction. And it kind of looks, if you've been up there, it looks like a moonscape. It's like really fresh looking lava flows. Then we're looking at a broad area, many miles, and there are no rivers or streams in any of this land. And this area gets a lot, right now there's many feet of snow covering this whole area. All that snow, when it melts, it all percolates into the ground. All right, so these volcanic deposits catch all this rain and snow, it percolates into the ground, and it becomes groundwater. Very different from what happens in the Ochaco's. And this is just what those lava flows, it's really hard to think of something like a lava flow being porous or full of holes, but those lava flows that we were just looking at in the last image, if we were to cut through, we would see, oh, my lasers, there we go. We would see, really kind of dense, heavy, dark brown or black rock, but it's full of fractures. So if you have held a piece of basalt, or if you've had to pay someone to excavate through basalt, it's a really heavy, dense rock. It doesn't seem like it would be a good, conveyor of water. But because it's full of all of these fractures, that water can percolate down into the rock and actually flow through the fractures of the rock. So because basalt has very high porosity, or all of these little holes, and very high permeability, meaning the holes are connected, it can transmit large amounts of water. And so these basalt lava flows act like volcanic sponges. Hydrologists who work in this area actually call this part of the High Cascades the volcanic sponge because it's holding so much water. And just to remind you of what that part of the Cascades looks like, this is Central Oregon. The black dots are volcanoes, so there's Mount Hood, Mount Jefferson, Three Sisters. But the red is just lava flows that are associated with those volcanoes or with smaller volcanoes that aren't even labeled on the map. And so in Central Oregon, there are lava flows everywhere. So when you think of how much water can be held in all of these lava flows, most of the precipitation that falls in the High Cascades that ends up in the Deschutes Basin, most of it actually ends up in the ground before it makes its way to a river. All right. So if we kind of look at that superimposed with the rivers and streams in Oregon, notice that there's lots of rivers and streams all throughout the state, but there's this area here where there's none. And it's kind of easy to say, well, that's easy, I know the Cascades are somewhere here, that's east of the Cascades, and east of the Cascades it's an arid environment. But something else is going on there, because there's lots of rivers and streams in every other place east of the Cascades. And this area here, like this is Newberry Volcano. This is not east of the Cascades. This is the Cascades, and it still is that area where there's no surface water. And that's because of all those lava flows. There are so many recent lava flows and cinder deposits and ash deposits that most of that water becomes groundwater. So now when you see this map, I kind of want you to sort of imagine you're looking at the rivers and streams, and these three rivers in particular, but wherever you see these bare areas around them where there are no rivers and streams, you need to imagine there is a whole bunch of groundwater in that area, because all that precipitation that fell in that area ended up as groundwater. All right, so here is another way of looking at that. This blob is the upper Deschutes Basin. We were looking at the full Deschutes Basin in some of the previous images where we had this kind of black outline that went all the way up to the Columbia River. Now we're just looking at the upper part of the Deschutes Basin, right in that this is the area where the three rivers come together, the convergence of the three rivers. And so Bend would be like here, and Sisters is out here. So hopefully that, I know this is sort of a discombobulated blob of material, it's hard to get your bearings. The gray represents topography, so we're kind of looking at the topographic. Here's the Cascades, all these little peaks out here, Cascade volcanoes. And the colors represent rivers and streams. This is the Deschutes River. Come on, there we go. There's the Deschutes River. And then here's where the Crooked River feeds into the Deschutes and the Metolius River feeds into the Deschutes. So color represents rivers. And wherever you see blue, those rivers are gaining water from groundwater. So all that groundwater does eventually come back to the surface and feeds these rivers. And anywhere you see blue, that's a spring-fed river. So like the Metolius is blue, 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 the darkest of blues, all the way from it springs up as a fully formed river, as described in the play. And the Deschutes as well is a spring-fed river. The Crooked is not showing up here at all, it's just black, because there is very little contribution of springs to the Crooked. There's some, but mostly it's surface water. We kind of talked about those soils have a lot of clay. That doesn't allow for a lot of groundwater to accumulate, and so it's surface water feeding the Crooked. So everywhere you see blue, that represents springs feeding the rivers, and everywhere you see red, that represents the river is traveling across such young volcanic material that it is actually losing water into the ground as it flows. And there's this whole section of the Deschutes upstream from Bend where it loses a significant amount of water into the ground because it's flowing over these young lava flows. Paulina Creek, the one creek that comes off of Newberry Volcano, gets smaller and smaller and smaller as it goes because it's disappearing into the volcanic rock of the volcano as it travels down slopes. All right, so here's what the Deschutes looks like up high in those areas where it's a spring-fed river, in the places, up in the high Cascades where it begins. This guy captures all the attention in this picture. It's the Dillon Falls, which is near Bend. Crazy kayaker. But on the other side of the river, there's a lava flow. First of all, there's a very recent lava flow, and any precipitation that falls on that lava flow goes right into the lava flow. It does not flow across the surface. And then when it reaches the end of the lava flow, it comes out as springs. So we're actually seeing the Deschutes River gaining water because of springs entering into it. And what do we have next? Metolius. Beautiful river, she knew in the play. So spring-fed the whole way. Clear, cold water. Metolius is famous for its crystal clear water because it's spring-fed and very, very cold. And again, it's flowing like this is a lava flow. It's flowing right across the lava flow. And another picture of the Metolius, and you can see just huge amounts of water entering that river from springs. Not only does the whole river come up from one kind of main spring at the head of the Metolius, but as that river flows, it gets more and more water as it goes from these springs feeding it. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the Western Cascades and the High Cascades, and that does play a role in where these rivers meet. And what the landscape is like and the place where these rivers meet. So we'll just spend a little bit of time talking about what are some of the differences between the High Cascades, the area that we think of as the snow-covered peaks, Mount Hood and Mount Jefferson and the Three Sisters, and the Western Cascades, this older eroded area. So if we look at another map of the state, this map now shows faults. All of those black lines are faults. And there's a whole series of faults that come in from southeastern Oregon across, kind of running northwest into the Bend and Sisters area. Those faults kind of tee into the Cascades. Here, the High Cascades are labeled here, and the little dashed line represents the extent of the High Cascades. And those faults just kind of run right into the Cascades in central Oregon. And these faults are potentially active. They haven't been active in historical time, but they could be active again. So here's just kind of a drawing that shows, it's a simplified version of what the Cascades would have looked like maybe 5 million years ago. So if we were here in central Oregon, or if we're over on the west side from Portland, we're going to go over to eastern Oregon, we would kind of rise up over the crest of the Cascades and descend down into eastern Oregon, and it's more or less a continuous mountain range. And about 5 million years ago, those faults from southeastern Oregon kind of propagated into the Cascades. So these are the lines along which things are going to move. Things go up or down along faults. And so about 5 million years ago, faulting occurred And the Cascades, I know this is crazy to think about, but the mountains actually, so if I need to go back just one slide, sorry. Look at these are green rocks representing the Cascades. Those green rocks collapse down in this next image. There they are. This did not all occur in one giant earthquake. This occurred in many earthquakes over hundreds or thousands of years, but the offset is thousands of feet. So these are significant. This is significant changing of the topography. And the high Cascades have been built up in that kind of rubble of the older Western Cascade mountain range. All right, so that's a significant change in the topography of the Cascades. That means now, if you're coming from the Willamette Valley, you go up in all that rugged topography of the Western Cascades, you might be following the Sandy River or the Santiam or the Mackenzie, but you're really like winding through all this rugged topography of the Western Cascades. Then you go over the crest and actually down, and you kind of have to go up another little, hill before you get out into Eastern Oregon. So it really significantly changed the topography of the Cascades. It also really significantly changed what was happening in terms of erosion or deposition of material. So if I back up again one more time, prior to 5 million years ago, any lava flow or flood or anything coming off of these volcanoes is going to go right out into the Deschutes Basin, this big broad area east of the Cascades, and fill up that basin. So when you see these green and lighter green colors here, that's indicating many, many layers of volcanic material all stacked up on top of each other, representing millions of years worth of crazy stuff going on in the volcano, like volcanic eruptions. Maybe a lava flow comes down and dams the river and fills up the river channel, and a big lake backs up, and then maybe a big flood comes through. But it's all representing deposition of material, new material, flood deposits, lava flows, ash deposits. And then once this faulting occurs, now as these volcanoes build themselves up again, lava flows can come down the east side of the volcanoes, but they hit a wall. I mean, it's actually literally kind of a geologic wall of this fault. And they can't go any further, and that means the Deschutes Basin isn't filling up anymore with lava flows and flood deposits, and the rivers, the Metolius and the Crooked and the Deschutes River, can now cut canyons through. We've gone from millions of years worth of deposition of material to now millions of years worth of erosion of material. And so when those rivers, for the Deschutes and the Crooked River, the Deschutes and the Metolius River, when they start in their origins in the high Cascades, they're going through young material. They can't really keep up with it. They can't erode fast enough because another lava flow is going to come and cover them up. But once they find their way into the Deschutes Basin, then they can erode these spectacular canyons. All right. So there are those two areas, the high Cascades and the Western Cascades, once again. And now we'll put the rivers back on the map. And so you can really see the Deschutes River spends quite a bit of its time up here in that active region of material being deposited instead of eroded. And the Metolius spends its its first few miles in that region where material is being deposited instead of being eroded. So if we put that back on this image, we kind of picture where these rivers belong in this image. In the high Cascades, the Deschutes River and the Metolius River flow in this kind of topography through recent volcanic deposits. Very little erosion has occurred. Or if you want to give the rivers some credit, they're really trying to erode, but another lava flow just comes and covers up everything that they've done. So the overall bookkeeping of material is that material is stacking up, not that material is being eroded. All right. And in the Deschutes Basin, once the Metolius and the Deschutes rivers get out into the Deschutes Basin, then they're going through older volcanic deposits, and they can do some real erosion because they don't have to worry about another lava flow coming and covering up everything that they've done. All right, so again, if we put that on the map with the rivers, here, the Deschutes and the Metolius here are going through areas where lots of volcanic activity is occurring and they can't do much erosion. Once they get out here, into the Deschutes Basin. A little further east, they're going to start cutting deep canyons. So this is what that looks like up high in the areas where they can't do much erosion. This is the Deschutes River, and you can see that there's a lava flow right there. It's one reason why the river hasn't been able to do much erosion, because a lava flow very recently has covered its path and it had to fight a new path through that lava flow. Another reason it hasn't had a chance to do much erosion is it's a spring-fed river. We saw some of the springs feeding it. And spring-fed rivers have very even flows. They don't have these high flood times and then low dry times, because the springs are constantly feeding water into the river. So without a big flood coming down through the river, it's really hard for the river to do erosion. So the river is right there. You can walk right up to the bank of the river. It's not down in a big canyon. And the same thing, we already saw this picture of the Metolius River. It's flowing right across the lava flow. It's right there at kind of the bank of the river is essentially the same topography as most of what's around it. It's not in a big canyon. And that's very different than once these rivers get out into the Deschutes Basin. And now there's not as much accumulation of volcanic material, which means the rivers can just have a heyday and erode all the way through these much older, these are all volcanic deposits, but the rivers have been able to erode through them because they represent volcanism from millions of years ago instead of just thousands of years ago. All right, so this is the confluence of White Shoes Creek and Deschutes River, gorgeous canyons. Here's another picture. Come on, this is a good one. There we go. Scout Camp Trail. If you're ever in Central Oregon, you want a short but very dramatic hike, check out Scout Camp Trail. These just layer upon layer upon layer, representing that period of time where the Cascades had this continuous sort of access. Any lava flow that came down off the Cascades just went right out into the Deschutes Basin. This is prior to the faulting that occurred. All right. Okay, so we looked at where each river begins and the differences in where these rivers begin, and now we'll look at their convergence. What happens when they meet? Well, these are almost the same photo, not quite, but close. So this here is a good kind of landmark to keep your eye on, and then in this next slide, there's that rock face. And this is before, it's really hard to read, but this says Cove Palisades State Park, Portland General Electric Photograph Collection. PGE put the dam in. They have great photos of what it looked like before the dam went in. So this is the convergence of the Crooked River here and the Deschutes River here. The convergence of rivers, confluence of rivers, they're great for biology. I don't know if there's anything amazing in geology that happens at a convergence of a river, but biologically a lot is going on here. These are kind of crossroads of, these are desert rivers. This is an arid environment, and so animals are losing my laser again, I apologize. Animals are using these river corridors on land to move around and follow water. Aquatic species are using these rivers to migrate or to move up and down the river system. And so biologically, there's a lot that happens at a convergence of a river because it's kind of the crossroads of trails out in the desert. Get some more pictures. This is, I couldn't find a date for this, but it's obviously before the dam went in. It says the Cove, Oregon, and Crooked River Canyon. So we're looking up the Crooked River Canyon. This is now under the waters of Lake Chinook. And one more image from 1940, the confluence of the Crooked here, and the Deschutes here, and then the Deschutes coming out, and the convergence of the Metolius will be shortly out of this photo. So biologically, a lot is going on here, and humans love a convergence, or a confluence of rivers. Both those words, I think we really like those words. We really like the idea of rivers coming together. And that shows in this area, humans have been in this area since time immemorial. And this is a petroglyph rock. It's called Crooked River Petroglyph. The whole rock is covered with these signs that people were there very near to that confluence, and that this was a special place for millennia. Come on. All right. So just to kind of sum up what we've gone through, all three rivers receive an enormous, this is not the summary. I'm ahead of myself. There's a third river, a fourth river that joins the party here. So we've looked at the Crooked River, the Deschutes River, and the Metolius River. They come together at this convergence, but they also, all three of them receive enormous inputs from these springs. We kind of left it at there's all this rain and snow that falls in the Cascades and it becomes groundwater. But where does it come back up? Where does it come out as springs? So we're going to take a look at that. And again, here's that image. We already kind of got a sneak peek. Everywhere where you see blue is where springs are feeding into the rivers. And if you look at the confluence of here's the Crooked, here's the Deschutes, and here's the Metolius, most of the blue, aside from the Metolius, the headwaters of the Metolius where it's just dark blue, most of the blue in this entire map of the Upper Deschutes Basin is all right here at the convergence of these three rivers. So not only do these three rivers all come together in this one location, but groundwater comes in at this location as well. So lots of springs in that area where they converge. And here are some kind of drawings to help sort of illustrate that. So we'll look at the Deschutes River first, and you kind of have to use your imagination a little bit with these drawings. But think of the high Cascades where the Deschutes River starts, high topography, lots of rain and snow that's falling, and this kind of black blob here represents recent lava flows. So this whole part of the high Cascades is covered with very young volcanic material. So when that rain and snow falls, it percolates down into the lava flows or into the pumice deposits or the cinder deposits, and then it comes out as springs and it feeds the Deschutes River. But not all of it comes out as springs. Some of it stays underground and takes a much longer flow path, and it doesn't come out as springs until it gets into that area of the confluence. So it has a lot to do with what the underlying geology is. The Deschutes River is flowing across the surface of the land, but underneath that land are these porous lava flows, and it's not just at the surface that these geologic deposits exist. There are lava flows and cinder deposits and pumice deposits at depth as well, and they're conveying all that groundwater that entered the ground here in the high Cascades, flowed as groundwater, and then as the river cuts a deeper and deeper and deeper canyon, those aquifers, those layers that are conveying groundwater are exposed. So it's not until the river gets down into those deep canyons that all that groundwater can come up to the surface. You can ignore these numbers unless you really like thinking in cubic feet per second. It's just representing how much volume is flowing through the river. And the numbers, the size, the actual numbers don't matter so much. What really is kind of important is to know that the Upper Deschutes River, it's a pretty good sized river. Like this is at 1400 CFS. It's just a volume that's moving through a certain space at a certain time, but it's something that you could like whitewater raft in. It's not something that you could get in and walk across the stream. It's a pretty good sized river. And then it actually loses water as it goes because water is disappearing into the ground as the river flows. And then in the area of convergence, it like more than triples in size because so much groundwater is coming to into the river at that location. All right, the Metolius River, very similar. It starts in the high Cascades, lots of rain and snow, it goes into the ground, and then comes out as springs and feeds the Metolius River. At the head of the Metolius River, it's about 110 cubic feet per second. A cubic foot is just a foot by a foot by a foot. Some people describe it as the size of a basketball. That much water moving through just past one spot every second. So just picture 110 basketballs moving right past me every second. That's the size of the Metolius when it comes out of the ground. That is a stream. You wouldn't be doing any rafting, probably not even any canoeing on that. You would just be walking through it. That's a small stream. But by the time the Metolius, whoops, it's not supposed to. By the time the Metolius gets down into these canyons, it's 1,350 CFS. So it's a large river by that time because it's so much groundwater has come into the river. And then a cricket river is very different from the other two. Here we have to use our imaginations. The volcanoes that the cricket river starts in don't have recent lava flows. They don't have tall, pointy peaks. They've been eroded and rounded and subdued, like what we saw in those photos. So all this material has been weathered and altered and turned to clay. And there are not, notice that groundwater beneath the rivers, it isn't there anymore. The geologic formation directly underneath the river or under the surface of the earth is rich in clay, and water isn't going to percolate down into the ground. But as the Cricket River cuts down into deeper and deeper canyons and it joins the Deschutes and the Metolius, it enters that same area of where there's a lot of groundwater. And so just like the Metolius, just like the Deschutes, once it gets to the end of its run, it too gets a significant input from groundwater. So in the Prineville area, it can be anywhere from 0 to 6,000 CFS. Remember, the Cricket River has flood stages and dry stages every year in the summer and fall. It's very, very dry. Maybe not 0, but pretty darn close to it. And then in the winter, it can be a raging river. Now, all of these numbers that I've assigned to these rivers, these are pre-dam, pre-irrigation. This is just kind of looking at what it was like before we changed some of the flows. And by the time the Cricket River gets down here near the confluence, then it gets this steady supply from groundwater. All right, so at the confluence, the groundwater discharge, here, all that blue, is about 2,300 CFS. Again, if you don't think in that type of volume, that's okay. Just visualize that as a very good sized river, bigger than any of each of the 3 rivers alone upstream. The Crooked might get larger than that during flood stage, but only during flood stage. So these 3 rivers are converging in this one location, and at that location, they essentially meet a 4th river, which is groundwater flowing into the area. All right, so now to kind of summarize that, the Cricket River is the product of older, eroded volcanoes from ancient subduction zone that no longer is active. The Deschutes and Metolius rivers are the product of young, active volcanoes in the high Cascades, and the convergence of the 3 rivers brings waters from these old and young mountain ranges together, but it also brings surface and groundwater together, which significantly increases the flow of all 3 rivers. And as the Deschutes continues after convergence, that groundwater really is what's making up the entire flow of the Deschutes as it works its way up north towards the Columbia. And that's all I have to say. There's some information for where all that came from, because I am not a hydrologist. I study the volcanoes in this area, but if you're interested in where this material came from, there's some information there. Thank you.
Another round of applause for Danielle McKay, please. That was really It is a little late, but we are going to try to give you a few minutes to speak with the artists if you'd like to stick around. We're going to just set up some chairs, and Josie, Sara Jean, Danielle, Mondi, if you'd like to come on down.
I was wondering about the Brighton Bush has a lot of
Brighton Bush Hot Springs, yeah.
what that has to do with the water.
Sounds like a question for the geologist. What does Brighton Bush Hot Springs have to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So most of the springs come up cold, and that's great for fish habitat and keeping the rivers cool. But some of them come up hot. Those are also springs that represent some of that groundwater that fell maybe tens or hundreds of years ago and percolated through the ground and got deep enough. There are different flow paths. Some of the flow paths in groundwater are shallow. They just pop back up a few weeks or years later, that water comes back up as a spring. Some of those flow paths are much deeper and they don't pop back up until they get down to the confluence of the three rivers. Some of those flow paths are even deeper and they go deep enough that they pick up some heat because the deeper into the earth you go, the warmer it is. And even the cold springs, like even the Metolius, has some component of geothermal. There is some temperature input in there because of some of the heat from that flow path just got deep enough to get warmed a little bit from the earth.
Other questions?
I would like to know how much geology was required to write the play and then perform the play. So, Sara Jean and also Josie, how much geology did you learn ahead of time?
That is an excellent question. I did come into this project with very little understanding about anything that I was taking on. So I took a trip to the public library and got everything I possibly could. But what really helped was a very early discussion with this one right here, where I was able to ask questions and get an understanding of how things worked. And one of the things you said in that discussion is you're like, it's just a story of eroding up or eroding down, building up and eroding down. And I was like, okay, thematically I can work with this. This is gonna be good. So, Josie, do you have anything to say?
I don't have anything to say.
I'm just giving you my point though. It's like, don't give me that.
Any other questions?
Couple, they're kind of geological ones, and then one comment for the artist. With the eruption of St. Helens, how did that affect the chances of like earthquakes in major, like with the fault, like how did that affect the fault line in Florida? We have it, sure. And then you talked about the Western Cascades, kind of going to the rubble, would Mount Tabor, volcanoes locally, Rocky View, Powell View, Mount Scott, would those be considered part of that Western Cascade kind of leftovers as well? And then for the artist, I was wondering, is Pickles the look we need for a cat? Is Pickles the real cat, or we played a screen like you?
I asked my son for a cat name and he said Pickles, so I'll report back to him.
All right, great question. So Mount St. Helens is a cascade volcano, and so the question of the eruption of Mount St. Helens, does that affect faults? And we're all probably fairly aware of the Cascadia subduction zone, not just for volcanoes, but also earthquakes, big ones, which is good that you're all aware of that. So there's no a volcanic eruption, there's no kind of, direct triggering of faults. But there are definitely some relationships between volcanoes and faults. And one relationship that is really great for us is that as magma moves its way up from depth to a more shallow area where it could erupt, it breaks rock as it goes. And anytime rock is broken, that's an earthquake. That's a small earthquake. So volcanoes are very nice in that they give us warning before they erupt, and it's because that magma is working its way up towards the surface, and that's registered as a series of very small earthquakes. So the movement of magma can trigger earthquakes, but those earthquakes are small. They're too small to feel in most cases, even if you were standing right in the area where it occurred. But we have very sensitive equipment that can monitor that and can give us warning of a volcanic eruption. And then the flip side of that, would a large Cascadia subduction zone earthquake off the coast of Oregon, would that trigger volcanic eruptions?
Or the opposite, the volcano.
Or the other, yeah, so.
The volcano prevent the earthquake may lay off steam.
Yeah, so there's no direct, relationship really between Mount St. Helens or any other volcano on the surface here. If it erupts, the fault, which is way offshore, of Oregon, kind of west of Oregon's coast, it doesn't even know that occurred. There's just nothing there that's related. What could be related though is the flip side of that. If the earthquake occurs, like if a very large, like magnitude 8 or magnitude 9 earthquake occurs off the coast of Oregon, could that trigger a volcanic eruption? Because that does cause some shaking. Like the eruption of Mount St. Helens doesn't cause any movement along the fault, but movement along the fault causes movement everywhere across the state. So could that trigger an eruption? And I would say 10 or 15 years ago, most geologists would say no. But now, the more we look at these big, like not Cascadia eruption, big subduction zone earthquakes, like the 2011 earthquake in Japan, and there's been earthquakes in New Zealand, a subduction zone in New Zealand, earthquakes along the subduction zone in South America, along the Andes. And there is some indication that there can be volcanic activity associated with that. And it wouldn't be like the earthquake occurs and then the next day all the volcanoes go off. Instead, if there is one volcano that maybe is primed to perhaps erupt in the next 100 years, maybe it erupts in the next 20 or 50 years instead because of this earthquake. So there is some relation, but it is not a direct, like, chain of hazards that we have to, you know. It was a long answer, sorry.
Perhaps a question for the creative team?
Do a lot of translation for this, like you're having to assign personality traits to a body of water. And so I'm wondering how you did that.
How long do you have?
I'll try to keep it short. That's a great question. I mean, first of all, I took a lot of artistic liberties. I just decided what they were to me, and I have seen each one of these rivers and kind of tried to get a sense of my impression of them and how that would translate into a human being. Also, our discussion helped me a lot, figuring out the facts of these rivers. And so just kind of started there and just tried to translate that into people I know, or people that I've experienced. So that's kind of how I did it. I hope that answers it.
I'm going to be selfish and ask a question just because I am actually curious myself. So we have this play, beautiful play by Sara Jean, but then Josie, you and Mondi take this play and you have production meetings to make a production out of it. And I'm curious what does that look like? How do you take something that's on the page and find a way to have a vision and realize that?
To go first. Let's see. Well, I feel like any process, we have a meeting and we kind of like have read the play and we sort of, vibe about it. And just sort of like there's some brainstorming that occurs, like what, based on these words, what feelings, what imagery, what colors, what sounds, what smells, not in this case, not in most cases. There's not a lot of smell-o-vision theater, for good or for ill, I don't know. And I feel like as the director's job is to sort of helm that process. It's a little bit compressed because she did also half of the tech and I did the other half. So there were not a lot of minds to meld together. So I feel like we were pretty on the same page as far as what we felt like was required in terms of lights and sound. So yeah, I just try to do a good job for Josie.
Oh, Monty's a genius. First of all, I'm gonna start that because I'm like, I think I want something that's kind of bright, but kind of warm. Can you do that? So she was amazing. I think the thing that I would add is that the actors are geniuses. And there were lots of times where I just did this, no lie, while they were rehearsing. And those little dings, those happened in my brain. I'm like, at this point, we should have this image. At this point, this sound should come in. Really so much based on the work that they did in the room and the movement that they were doing. So that was incredibly helpful to my creative process.
Love that. Any other questions out there? Yes.
I feel like I need to preface that I will be speaking in Spanish, but I will be coming back in English, so please do not stress. Mi pregunta es para Josie. Como la directora del proyecto, tú tienes que como contener todo, que sea como que se entienda, y me gustaría saber en qué parte particularmente del movimiento y también para la historia, como qué parte fue, no lo difícil, pero cómo contienes todo para que todo sea como, para que se entienda y que no, porque se puede ir en muchas direcciones y como, no sé, me intriga eso de ti, hacer cómo funciona tu mente, todo eso. How do you contain all of the movement and all of the process to make sure that this one cohesive narrative through line, because I feel like there is a lot of ways that it can go, you know, everywhere. So I'm just very curious about how your mind works in that way. Yes.
The really amazing thing about this play is the more that you look at it, the more you read it, you start to see how these three stories start to come together. And so I feel like I had rather an easy job, and once again, y'all, I can't give enough love to the actors. They were madness. I need you to know, day 3, we did this in 2 weeks, about 2 weeks. Day 3, they were off book. And so as we were standing up and blocking things, they would do certain movements. And I felt like the only job I had, the biggest job, I should say the biggest job that I had was to be sure that, yes, the cohesiveness happened, but also you knew where you were, who you were talking to. And so that's how the movement came in. In my crazy brain, there were like 3 entities. There were, of course, the friends, the school friends, and then there were the rivers, and then there were, like, I call them river sprites. So they were the spirits of the rivers. When they were flowing, these were like the spirits of the rivers that kind of knew the whole story and knew how they came together and knew where they were going to end up. Besides the playwright, right? That was very, very clear. So being able to kind of make sure that those stories were melding together and that they weren't jarring. You weren't like, okay, where am I now? You were able to see how they were flowing into each other. Yes, there was some work I did there, but there was so much beautiful work that the actors did as well.
Okay, I think maybe one more. Do we have another question out there? Someone do, if that's okay.
All 4 of you. Yes, one at a time. Musical chair style. Just kidding. What is your favorite geological structure that exists in the entire world as we know it?
Should I give y'all a minute?
Bodies of water, can you do bodies of water? The Red Sea.
I mean, if we're doing bodies of water, it is the Puget Sound, particularly the Hood Canal area. Love it.
I really don't know how to answer this. I mean, I think this is cheating, but the Earth itself is a geologic feature, and lets me not answer the question because I just can't pick a favorite. But the whole planet is just amazing, and the processes that, you know, created what we see and what have existed in the past and what will exist in the future.
I feel like the playwright in the play's sentiment is apt to say, like, she could no longer remember a single geological feature
Yes.
on the planet where she was born. Now I'm last, so I feel like it has to be the most important or the least important. And that was a lot of stalling, and I still can't think of anything. I'm gonna say Devil's Post Pile. I don't even remember where that is, but I went there when I was a child, and I remember thinking that it was really cool.
So thank you all for coming. I just want you to know that we've talked about our favorite geologic sites. This project is all about celebrating Oregon. You may know that climate change is upon us and things are changing. And this project tries to acknowledge that. You may have even noticed some hints of that in the play tonight. So we encourage you to help support our Indigenous friends who are working with their traditional ecological knowledge to help us restore our state and our country. So please consider visiting our website to try to support them. And thank you again for coming out. I want to give a shout out to our crew in the back. Thank you. And our crew right here. Thank you again for coming tonight. Have a good evening.